fleur-de-lays, which is a very natural formation, of course, a fleur-de-lay. There are, according to Fred Steckling here, there are reservoirs of water. There are huge tunnels, or at least tubes laying across the surface of the moon. Perhaps there is some moisture up there. Perhaps there is some atmosphere up there. A lot of things about the moon that we just have not been told about. And yet the American taxpayer spent billions of dollars to send a contingent of Americans up there. And what they found out, we have only heard part of it. Why?
Well, Newton's law of gravity was found to be an error when we explored the moon. And the public, I would say, is kept many years behind the latest research findings. For instance, in astronomical circles, it was believed that the neutral point between the moon and the Earth was about 25,000 miles. Well, when we got there, we found it was not true, and it was about 40 to 44,000 miles. That changes the concept of gravity on the moon around greatly, and
the gravity of the moon, or the
gravity of the moon,
density of the moon.
Not only that, well, that hangs together. If the gravity is higher on the moon, about 50 to 60% of Earth, or half of ours, then the moon would be able to hold an atmosphere and would hold surface water in some places, and support vegetation and so forth. And Bill Bryan, for instance, with whom I'm in contact with, he stated that this is true. And he said he observed a movie which I also studied very carefully when the Apollo astronauts sit there driving on with their rover, that electrical vehicle. He said it's impossible with the speed that they were driving around that this vehicle wouldn't tip over unless the gravity on the moon is higher. And he also stated that when the historical jump was made by the astronaut, he was supposed to jump 3 feet. He only made it 18 inches, which means the gravity is higher on the moon. And the flag was waving, the dust that was thrown up from the tires of the vehicle was drifting in the
atmosphere.
So to call non-existent lunar atmosphere. In a vacuum, this would never happen. So there's a lot of things that we haven't been told.
You know, I think when Pete Conrad was on with Michael Jackson, someone brought up to Pete about the fact that the atmosphere inside the spacecraft before they egressed the spacecraft and went outside was down to 1.5 inches per second rather than just pure vacuum.
Right.
And as if they knew that there was a little bit of atmosphere out there, and so they had to balance it with the atmosphere. Conrad said that wasn't so, that's just as far as their instruments went. But they did vacate the entire spacecraft of all air.
Ex-astronaut Brian O'Leary, he made a statement. He said that Pete Conrad and Alan Bean were playing using a metal cap, which was left over from an experiment, and they were playing frisbee on the moon, and they were enjoying how well this little frisbee metal cup was flying around in the lunar atmosphere. That's what Brian O'Leary stated in his article.
So there may be some atmosphere up there. We've never been told about it. Why would something like that be hidden from us, that there is a little bit of atmosphere on the moon?
Well, the moon is a new frontier. If we set up bases there, most people know that NASA's lunar exploration was a military operation to at least 95%, perhaps even more.
Try 100%.
Let's say 100. And that the military is always looking for new frontiers, new bases, new places to go. If they find life on the moon livable for our bases there, that would be a top-secret situation. They would keep it as much as they can from the public for their future experiments.
But according to you, there are other bases there for some other people who kind of feel that the moon belongs to them.
Well, yes, that's what Maurice Chatelain says in his book. He says that Apollo 13 was... had some problems there with the oxygen tanks, and he heard rumors, that's what Chatelain says, that they had an atomic device on board which was supposed to be detonated on the moon. Now, if somebody is there, which I'm sure there is, I'm sure they wouldn't enjoy such a thing.
That was a no-no. And so they crippled the spacecraft to the point that it could not land on the moon, but did let the astronauts get back.
They heard all kinds of strange noises on their radio, transmissions from the area of the moon. As a matter of fact, radio transmissions were picked up from the moon and vicinity all the way back in the 1920s, but it was kept secret then.
Yes, Captain. How do we get a hold of the book now? Alien Bases on the Moon. You want to give that address again?
Okay, Alien Bases on the Moon. It can be ordered from GAF International, P.O. Box 1722, Vista, California 92083, and it costs $9.95 and $1 for postage and handling.
Okay. You ready to take another call? We have Mike on the line. Mike, what's your question for Fred Steckling tonight?
Well, one of my first questions is his credentials. I don't think I caught his credentials as a scientist, as an astronomer, as a photographer. It seems that most of the time you'd like us to believe that NASA's lying and the colleges and universities are lying and the major corporations are lying, but they have credentials. I'd like to know Mr. Steckling's credentials.
A credentialed person can shield the truth as well as a non-credentialed one.
I'd like to know Mr. Steckling's credentials that makes him an expert.
Well, okay, first of all, I never call myself an expert. Okay, I'm a researcher, right? And I'm an amateur astronomer. I'm also a pilot.
How about your academic background? Do you have a PhD in astrophysics? Or?
No, I don't have a PhD, sir.
What's your academic background? I'm curious.
It's high school and college.
What did you study in college?
Science and...
You have a bachelor's degree from college?
I have a degree from Germany, you see. I graduated from the school in Germany.
And what was your specialty?
That was science.
Science?
Yes.
So you graduated from college with like a bachelor's degree in science, and you want us to believe that you're more competent in determining what's on the moon with your 17-inch telescope than Caltech would be with their 42-inch telescope at Mount Palomar?
Mount Palomar doesn't look at the moon.
Oh, I see. What about, do any colleges or universities look at the moon? Are you the only one? It's interesting, you mentioned amateur photographers. You give a great deal of credit to the amateur photographers. Aren't there professional photographers looking at the moon? Wouldn't it be a coup for a competent, renowned professional photographer to show the things that you show? And one other quick question. Why don't you bring your findings to reputable media, the Times, the LA Times, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Time Magazine? Why don't you bring your findings to them and say, hey, there's stuff on the moon. Let everybody know. It seems we have... Amateur astronomers.
Right, that's correct. They make me aware of where these things can be found. For instance, the copious photographic lunar atlas or link lunar Apollo catalogs, they give me in publications where these photographs can be found. And they have been taken by professional astronomers. They have never openly admitted what these things are. They have to just stood away from naming it. Just like the astronauts.
In other words,
well, like I say, I have seen these things on the moon. I'm not the only one.
Why don't we read about this in Time Magazine? Why don't we read these in reputable publications, your findings? Well, why do we have to listen to it on Bill Jenkins' show?
Well, let's say that I'm trying very much to make these publications aware of this book. And I'm working on it. The book just came out. It's pretty new. So I'm working on that. And hopefully in time to come you will read it in such a publication.
I'd like to have some science editor, some professional, nationally accepted scientist, maybe sit down and talk with you on Bill Jenkins' show. Why don't you invite someone, Bill, from a college or university that has a telescope that's looking at the moon also, and have kind of like a debate going on here. A reputable scientist, a reputable person from a university. But again, it seems that, universities and colleges are suspect, major corporations are suspect.
Well, I've tried to do this.
NASA is suspect, but Fred Steckling is not suspect, is he?
Let me give you just an example of how I've tried to do this.
Yeah.
I have, for instance, taken the incredible photographs of the head on Mars. I don't know whether you've seen those. Those were NASA photographs of this sculptured head on Mars, a face-up head with two eyes. And tears even coming down the face of it as it looks up. It's about 1.5 miles across. And there's been some enormous work done on it by Vincent DiPietro and Don Molinar. They're in Greenbelt, Maryland, and have shown that to reputable astronomers. And they say, well, obviously that's just a natural formation. And as you look at the entire scape